Malcolm,
Mm,
38% approval rating for the big, beautiful spending bill. They passed it anyway. They know
mhm,
they're going to get reelected. Malcolm,
mhm.
14% approval rating for the Congress, slightly above Kim Il jong, the North Korean dictator, for the Congress. But no problem. 95% of the incumbents get reelected anyway.
Mhm,
So it is no longer public service. It has become public self service.
mhm.
I'm going, I'm going to rake it over the coals for myself and my family. I'm going to funnel money into my account through insider trading. I'm going to get with the Trumps on their meme coins. The big, beautiful spending bill, great for big businesses, great for rich people, really shitty for the working poor, and
Yeah.
really shitty for the working class people. But that's okay. We don't need those people. So we're going to vote this in anyway. So Musk,
Well,
whatever you think of Musk, at least he's calling that out.
This is Black Man Spy.
Hi, I'm Malcolm Nance, and welcome to Black Man Spy. This week we have an exciting episode with a good guy, a guy I know, the Mooch, Anthony Scaramucci. My guest, he is founder and managing partner at Skybridge, a global alternative investment firm, and founder and chairman of SALT, a global thought leadership forum and venture studio. He served on President Donald J. Trump's 16-person presidential transition team, executive committee, and in 2017 briefly served as chief strategy officer of the Export Import Bank and White House communications director. He co-hosts the podcast The Rest is Politics US with Caddy K. Anthony Scaramucci is going to be a great guest. So let's welcome him to Black Man Spy.
Anthony Scaramucci, welcome, welcome. I am so glad to see you. You look great.
You
You
too,
look.
Malcolm. But it's probably not appropriate for this podcast, so you can cut it out. But black don't crack. But you know what? Beige don't age, Malcolm. Don't you forget that, okay?
Hey,
All right.
listen, it was
I
the
figured the way
Romans.
I figured the way you titled the podcast, I could get right there.
You could
I
go
think you,
right there.
I think
We're
you and
pretty
I look,
irreverent.
I think you and I look great for a combined age of 130.
Well, I have to always hark back to a combined. It is actually close to that. I always hark back to one of my favorite quotes from the Romans, which, by the way, I lived in Sicily for a while. We have a base there in Sicily, so I speak Italian. I almost married a woman from Treviso in the north. It was very funny, and the Italians at the time of Rome said, "The darker the skin, the sweeter the juice." So.
Amen. And listen, I see Italy. I see my former homeland is off the coast of Africa. That's how I describe Italy. Okay,
Well,
we're very
those
similar, my man. It's a real honor to be on with you.
Carthaginians had to get there somehow. So, with that, let's go into the serious discussion because the last four podcasts that I've done, we were almost. I started with Michael Steele, which was lots of fun and laughs, and the last three have descended into tears. But let's hope this goes another direction. We can keep it light. But because you are a specialist in economics and you worked in the White House and within the government as an advisor, I want to talk about tariffs. One thing that I try to explain to people within the context of this podcast is that espionage, intelligence collection, and war is not limited to the number of tanks. It's not just limited to the number of airplanes. All of these have an economic factor, right? You have to produce raw materials. You have to move them by train or by bulk ship. You have to put them into factories. The factories have to have manpower. That manpower has to get paid. That pay goes out into the general broader economy. And that shows the strength or the weakness of a nation, depending on whether they're spending it on social programs or whether they're spending it on tanks or living like the Scandinavians, right, where their social programs give them actual cultural strength, which makes people want to invest in them more. All of this being said, the United States now under President Donald Trump is going a completely different direction economically with his emphasis on tariffs as an income generating source. Does he really believe, first, does he really know that what a tariff is? or is he being cynical and understanding that it is a tax on the American public, and he just doesn't care what the source of income is?
Uh, I think he sees it as again, I think he's a malevolent guy. I think he's a really bad guy. I'm going to play him for a second
Okay.
so that you see how he sees it, and then I can tell you why it's erroneous the way he sees it. But I think the way he sees it is that the tariff will be put in place. Some of it will be absorbed by the manufacturer, and then, yes, the end user will end up paying some of it. And so he's cut taxes in some ways and he's raised taxes in others. But the economic fallacy of what I'm saying is that these are ridiculously regressive things to do. So if you want to hurt the working poor, you want to hurt the lower middle income people, inspire inflation through the big, beautiful spending bill. If you want to hurt those people, have tariffs, as don't go by me, go by Chairman Powell, who will tell you that the tariffs are inflationary and they will cause real hardship, economic hardship to these people. So the great irony of what Trump is doing is there's always, Malcolm, a kernel of truth in what he's doing. And this is what snags people. But then the ultimate policy is usually an abomination. So let's just talk about the kernel of truth. I think we all know this, but it bears repeating. We lopsided our trading deals after the end of the Second World War. We did that intentionally. We had
Right.
general agreement to trade and tariffs allowed for goods and services to flow freely into the U.S., unfettered, unprotected. We accepted forms of protectionism from around the world to allow for these economies to grow their middle class, to protect themselves, because we needed stronger middle class economies in the West that was devastated by the war to protect those Western democracies against the likes of a Joe Stalin, et cetera. So we did that. And I think the kernel of truth where Trump is, could there have been some surgical adjustments made to the trade system? We converted the trade system from GATT to the World Trade Organization. We let China in effectively as an emerging company. Excuse me. We let China in effectively as an emerging country. And could
You were
there
right
have
the first
been,
time.
yeah, exactly. Could there have been opportunities to surgically correct that? So a guy like Robert Lighthizer would say yes to that. Trump said, well, you can't come back into this administration because I don't want to use a scalpel this time. I want to use a iron-fisted cudgel. And so he's running around first 5 months of chaos, disrupted the U.S. economy, slowed down growth in other European nations, but also on the margin, international capital is flowing slightly. It's not gigantic yet, but it's flowing away from the United States. Look at the rise in the DAX, look at the rise in the FTSE. And so what he's doing is he's sowing seeds of doubt. He's putting stress on the rule of law. He's putting stress on the financial system. And then this big, beautiful bill, he's giving $7,000 break, if you will, to people making north of $1 million a year. And he's taking $700 worth of benefits from people making approximately $50,000 or less. And Malcolm, I'll finish with this one thought. Here is the hypocritical irony of the bill. They are cutting people off the Medicaid roll, 17 million of them. They're also hurting people, taking them off of Obamacare. But you know, and I know, if you get sick, Ronald Reagan signed legislation in 1986. If you or I got sick and walked into any of the nation's hospitals in the emergency room, they have a fiduciary and ethical responsibility to care for us.
Right.
And guess what? If we can't pay the bill's going to get absorbed into their bill. So two things are going on. Trump's team funded all these rural hospitals because they would effectively go out of business. And then, of course, the insurance rates for people that are paying the insurance are going to go through the roof as a result of this imbalance. It's just really bad capital allocation ideas from the administration, and very bad for lower and middle income people, regressive, frankly. But I guess they're in the search of creating a few trillionaires as opposed to serving the broader general public.
Well, we've seen this act before. I mean, this is in my reading of it, he just views everyone who is not really rich like him as the contractors below him, and he doesn't care
Right.
if he shorts them. He doesn't care that if he doesn't pay them or makes them take 10% of what the contracted overall payment amount is. And I think he doesn't know and or care what happens to the base worker, because that's those guys' problem. They've got enough money to buy a boat and have a second house. And I think that with the detachment from American society, his version of attachment, and this is where, I speak with Michael Cohen about this, Lev Parnas every week. He's very good at understanding where the base Walmart shopper is because of his education at Worldwide Wrestling. Right? He saw the things that excited them, which brought up their passions, the things that would make them infused. And he also saw that he only wanted one part of the electorate. He wanted the white male electorate, lower class, middle class, to bring them on board by mobilizing the nation against all others. But he also understood that phrase by Lyndon Johnson, right? If you can tell the lowest white man that he is better than the richest and most educated black man, he won't just give you a donation. He'll turn out his pockets for you. I think this is all subconscious with him. It's all about where he thinks money and capital should be. And so long as those stair steps of his supporters are there and existent and he can excite them, he doesn't care what the actual impacts are downstream, with regards to the hospitals, unless somebody who's investing in hospitals comes up and, says, hey, I need to make $1 trillion, what's his name? Rick Scott from Florida, right? Comes up and says, hey, you won't get my vote unless we get more ability for me to consolidate those hospitals that are going under and create a hospital monopoly. Who knows? So that being said, you know, a lot of the decisions that he makes, although they are based on excitement, um, I've had to do economic intelligence in my career on some of our third world potentates. Sometimes we just didn't have enough people who could speak Arabic in some of these places, and they would say, "Hey, could you translate this stuff?" And you see these deals that were related to financial abuse, fraud, bribery. We had people who were assigned to the FBI at one time who had to be brought from the military to be assigned to the FBI, doing these massive third world dictator bribery cases, without revealing anything. These people understood the global flow of money and where their bucket they could throw into that flow of money could reap them billions without it being seen. So some of the decisions that Donald Trump has made, to people who are professionals like myself and to the average schmo, is there market manipulation going on here? Because it's not just the Congress people who are suddenly, divesting in hospitals, or like one congressman, 24 hours before that vote, got rid of every share of his investment in rural hospitals, knowing that they would drop off immediately, or other people investing in defense stocks when certain, like when Lockheed Martin announces the F-2047 aircraft. That's minor stuff, right? That's just insider trading. But I'm talking market manipulation. Did he consciously make decisions about the tariffs, let them reach a point, and then make statements with the consciousness that it was going to make billions upon billions of dollars, who either shorted it or would invest in it or who would keep the faith with him? What do you think?
Well, I mean, it would be hard to keep the faith with him. I mean, he's basically told you it's basically told you, he's going to make money off the presidency. He's made $3+ billion in the last 5 months, hundreds of millions of dollars off of the meme coin activity, the crypto activities, other things he's doing. He's selling cologne. I think the subtext title of the cologne is Beta Male by Donald Trump. He's I don't know, he's selling anything that isn't nailed down, watches, Bibles. So no, I mean, he's decided that he's a huckster. He's a huckster in chief.
Mm.
I think that it's irrefutable that there's market manipulation going on. It's bold-faced market manipulation. He puts the tariffs on 24 hours before the markets go down. He puts a pause on the tariffs, but 24 hours before he says it, the markets go up. And so, yeah, I'm very confident that they're doing all of those things. So I guess the real question is, where is the, I don't know, are there any guardians? Is there anybody, I think if I could give a phone call to the not so distant past, 250 years ago, you just give a phone call and say, guys, you may want to add a few clauses if we get a complete malevolent person who lacks any ethics or moral character in the position, because you're making some assumptions about honor with this position. You're overly focused on George Washington, but
Right.
we've gone from George Washington to Donald J. Trump in 250 years, and who knows where we're going from here. Maybe we'll go back to something more honorable, or maybe it'll be even worse than Trump. My thing about Trump is that you get everything with him. You could get a few good ideas with him, but then you get an avalanche of really bad ideas.
Mhm.
And when somebody said to me once, "Oh, that guy's not going to get a job," and I said, "Why is that?" "Well, character is destiny." I'm like, "Well, is it though? I mean, with the president of the United States has 34 criminal indictments. He's been accused of all different things sexually. He
Right.
hangs out with Jeff Epstein. He's
Mhm.
sending birthday card greetings and letters to sexual predators. I mean, is character destiny,
Mhm.
or what?" And again, Malcolm, I think you've heard me say this. The best thing that Donald Trump has going for him are the Democrats. They post up two terrible candidates against them. They take out Joe Biden at the last minute. We're a year away from when they kicked Joe Biden. So 1 year ago, they kicked Joe Biden to the curb,
Mhm.
and then they brought in Harris without a primary. So the Democrats are supposed to be for the democracy, Malcolm, but they told Joe Biden in 2016 can't run against Hillary. They then told Bernie Sanders, you're doing too good of a job against Hillary. Take a powder, to the point where Debbie Wasserman Schultz, I don't know if you remember this, she was
I remember.
fired on the eve of the 2016 Democratic Convention for the manipulation of getting Hillary into position. So the democracy is no good for the Democrats, only in name, only in 2016. They then get Biden, who's a good candidate. He beats the incumbent president, but he's sunsetting. It's like we were choosing between a stable grandfather and a crazy uncle. But the stable grandfather started sunsetting. They lied to everybody. They could have said, "Hey, we got to do a primary. We got to ask President Biden to leave the race in September of 23." They don't do this. So
Yeah.
now you got Trump. And guess what? We know Trump. I said to people when I started with him, I gave him the benefit of the doubt every step of the way. It's an august position, the institution of the presidency. I'm a lifelong Republican. I'm going to try to help this man. I submit to everybody listening, you get close to this guy, you know he's a horrific person. You just know it. You can ask Michael Cohen. You
Right.
can ask Elon Musk. You can ask General Kelly, H.R. McMaster. You pick the person, anybody that gets inside of his electron orbit, in the first orbit around his nucleus. It's like,
Mhm.
oh, wow, that's a really malevolent, really bad person. He's had criminal defense attorneys that have called me and said, I've defended murderers, but this guy is 5 times worse than the murderers. Okay, so you tell me, okay, you tell me. So of course they're manipulating the markets. Of course
Yeah.
they're grifting off the market. Of course, you're an intelligence guy. Can I throw
Yeah.
a question back to you?
Sure.
What does Vladimir Putin have on him?
Well, 4 books later that I've written about this subject, I will give you a very honest answer because I wrote about this in my book, The Plot to Hack America, which came out 6 weeks before the 2016 election. It was just so obvious, these things. And when you do a scrub on it, and I learned by the time I wrote my third book, Plot to Betray America, I went to Putin's office in Dresden when he was a baby spy. He was a low KGB junior colonel. Very nice office building that they had. It wasn't an office building. It was an NGO from the 1930s, and it was in this luxurious neighborhood in which the great composer Schumann had a mansion, and every room in there had the window sills taken out and had microphones put in them. So no matter where you were in the building, your peers, if they were assigned to, could monitor you. Putin thrived in this environment. There were two things that they said that he really loved. One, he loved the art of human manipulation. He was a perfect human intelligence officer. He would find you, manipulate you. Two, he loved the East German centralized sort of Nazi-like communism that he had there, because people would always obey the chain of command. They wouldn't step outside the chain of command. Whereas in communism, the entire system was a lack of things, so everyone was always cheating the chain of command. His peers in his office there, including a KGB general, all they wanted to do was stay in East Germany, drink beer, and eat sausage. Right? Vladimir Putin didn't. Right up to the day that the Iron Curtain fell, he was flipping people as into spies. When he left and went to St. Petersburg, he learned that by the Soviet Union was collapsing, he liquidated the city of St. Petersburg and got the Russian mafia under his control. Now, this is instructive because Putin realized the old system was unsustainable, but capitalism and money could make you really control people far better than fear, right? And I often give this little lecture. There's a place in Spain that I used to live to. It used to be very small, and I used to live in Western Spain. I used to go to it in Eastern Spain every once in a while, called Puerto Banús. I don't know if you've ever heard of this place, near Marbella. Puerto Banús was at that time the place in the Costa del Sol that billionaires parked their yachts. If you didn't have a helo pad on your yacht, you weren't allowed in, right? And it was the Saudis were there, and that's when I was a senior sailor in the intelligence community, our submarine would come up there because it was just you weren't going to be seen, right? It's just one of those yachts, the yacht basins. If you didn't have money, you weren't going to be seen, and they would drop me off there. Um, I learned that there is a global oligarchy. This is money that is higher than passports, money that is higher than nation states. And if
Panama
you can
Papers,
operate
right?
with, yeah, and if you could
Yep.
live within that sphere, you could literally do anything so long as your money was good. Vladimir Putin immediately harnessed that money, and that's how he used his espionage, former KGB officers to gain control of Russia and the oligarchs. But he wanted a top-down German-style organization. When Donald Trump popped up in 2012 or 2013 at Miss Universe, there had already been files on him since 1977. 1977 is when Czech intelligence started doing surveillance on Ivana Trump. And the reporting officer to Czech intelligence was Ivana's father. And the best part is Czech TV2 in that country has all the physical files on Donald Trump. And The Guardian wrote a great extensive reporting about this, Luke Harding. But then Trump went to the Soviet Union in 1988. And when popped up in 2013 and had made indications in 2012, he wanted to run for president. Vladimir Putin had to have had wheelbarrows of that intelligence collection brought in, because Putin's like me, right? It'd be like making me president. I don't want to know about the economy. I don't want to know about anything. That can wait till after lunch. I want to know every spy operation going on in the world today, right now. Right? That's what I would say. This is what Putin did with Trump. And what Putin has done ever since that time is he brought a ecosystem of information around Trump by literally creating a reality around him in which the promise of global oligarchy money, starting with all this Putin controlled Russian oligarchs and hot Russian chicks, could be his. He could have a Trump Tower in Moscow. Trump, here's where I think Trump's naive. He thought he could buy an ex KGB officer off with the promise of a 2-story penthouse at the top of Trump Tower, Moscow. That guy may have a $250 billion of illicit funds. Vladimir Putin. He may be one of the richest men in the world. So Putin understands Trump as a recruitable character, not as an actual spy. He doesn't care about nuclear codes. Power is making that guy do what you want him to do. Now Trump wants to completely withdraw all sanctions and create this new partnership with Russia. So money is what makes the world go around.
Malcolm, what would be the recourse
Mm.
if Trump changed course and became more like a Western leader towards Putin? What would they do to him? They'd expose sex tapes. They would expose the money laundering. What would they do to him? They really not,
Well,
don't have
they
any.
certain they have reams on them. I mean, any kind. We have a saying when I taught at the Survival, Evasion, Resistance, and Escape School, the school where we teach you how to behave in captivity, including going into hostile countries. We had spies that would come and train about what do you do if the cops pick you up. Contact with the enemy is a trick. Everyone is an enemy until you're in the physical United States. It's as simple as that. They Every moment he was there, every conversation he's ever had, every time he had sex, all recorded without any question. Miss Universe 2013 is a gap. We don't know. Did he walk through the rooms with naked chicks? You don't know. But he praised Putin to the high heavens in 2014 to the point that Putin created the Internet Research Agency to manipulate U.S. opinion for him. But all of this being said, I want to jump back on to economics because this is tied into the global oligarchy. China is a standout example of a nation that is communist controlled, but with a capitalist infrastructure now, which has now gives them a centralized economic power, and that they are now, unfortunately, ridiculously, the adults in the room in the global economic market. I saw, I knew some things were up with China when I was living in Abu Dhabi. I lived in Abu Dhabi for 10 years. My late wife was a mega projects landscape architect. Have billions of dollars in projects she was doing. And then I suddenly saw her 50,000 Pakistani workers start transitioning to where 10,000 Chinese workers would come in. They would live in a compound by themselves. You never saw them out in town. They never left that compound. They were doing construction work on secret projects for the sheikh. Westerners were barely allowed in, and then things would magically appear, and those 10,000 Chinese workers would disappear. And I just thought, well, there's something at play in the world here I hadn't seen. Then I started seeing China all over sub-Saharan Africa and realized they were buying Africa. They were trading in countries. We have decided, apparently with Donald Trump, to surrender the world to China and to only focus on coal. I understand now China will produce every month more energy from solar and wind than we will produce in the next year, and China will be able to win the global power war that will power services and global communications, things like that in the future. So if all of this is Donald Trump's grand plan let me put it this way, to create a white supremacist economy in America based only on white Walmart shoppers, while imagining none of that stuff's made in China. Where is his mind? Is it just that he is addled? Does he have dementia? Or does he not care what's happening to the global markets because he doesn't believe in them? He only believes in the power of Donald Trump.
Yeah, I think it's the latter. He believes in the
Oh,
power of Donald Trump.
jeez.
He believes in the markets being geared towards the U.S. He's, the if you ever get Professor Rogoff on your podcast, Ken
Hmm.
Rogoff, he
Hmm.
writes about the current dollar calamity.
Yeah.
He says the title of the book is "Our Dollar, Your Problem," but we right now have dollar supremacy. That's helped us. It's given us a
Right.
laxity in our interest rate mechanisms, and it's also brought some hardship on the rest of the world while protecting us. But the continuation of this strategy is going to eventually lead to a debt crisis.
Right.
And so Trump is sitting there circa 1972. I always pick that year because that was the peak ratings year for Archie Bunker and all of the family. And so he sees the world through that Archie Bunker prism, which is basically white supremacists, Americans are in control, we can flex on other people militarily or economically. And so those people should then therefore pay for the privilege to enter our markets. They should pay taxes and duties and user fees to enter our markets. And what you're saying about China is true. Now, I'm a realist on China. They have a longer term plan than we do. They have some very smart policy advisors in place, but they have one thing going against them, and that is the Communist Party has been very restrictive in terms of human rights. It's almost impossible. I'll give this example, Malcolm. It's almost impossible to have an internationally recognized Chinese celebrity. There's no Taylor Swift of China. There are a lot of internationally recognized French, German, and British celebrities, but not China, because the restrictions are such. If they get an actress that's doing very well, they end up sequestering her and reminding her that she has certain obligations to the Communist Party. Or if a business leader, Jack Ma, they're like, oh, you're becoming a little bit too well known. We got to clip your wings and pull you down. So this makes it hard for China to export its culture and have it accepted. If you and I, we're getting old, you and me. If we drove around in a car in the Middle East, it was in the '80s. It was Madonna and American music.
Right.
It's still by and large that. And so the great irony of what I'm saying is we're squandering all of this. We had this position in the world where our soft power was quite perceived to be quite beneficial. Our soft power was perceived as a helping hand to the rest of the world, which helped us in so many different ways on the margin as it related to our economy and capital allocation. But the Chinese, they can give you the money, but the rhetorical question I always say to people, do you want to live in China? China's giving a lot of money to Africa. Rah, rah, we love the Chinese money in Africa. Do you yourself want to live in China? Well, the universal answer to that is usually no. When the Americans were given the money, it had this multiplication effect on it. When the Chinese were giving the money, it's a little bit of a demultiplier effect for them. So it's something people have to consider. And I say this to you because in your podcast, to me, this show, it represents hope. Because you're an American. You believe in the system. You believe in the flexibility of the system, the neuroplasticity of the system, and the adaptive change in the system. So the hope is that we can wait out Trump. The hope is when you really look at the numbers, the people that support Trump have generally been in the minority. If you put up a phenomenal candidate, an articulate candidate, somebody wise with wisdom, a unifying candidate with a soaring message about vision for the United States and what we can do in terms of technology, human rights, social progress, handling the debt crisis. If you put that candidate up, they would beat this rhetorical populist nonsense.
Right.
But in the two elections that Donald Trump, he's had 3 elections. They put up one generic elderly white man that beat him. In the other 2 elections, they put up 2 women, both experienced, both very bright. I'm not knocking them, but they just didn't have the gravitas. And in Hillary's case, if we're being honest, she didn't have the work ethic. And in Kamala, in Vice President Harris and Secretary of State Clinton, in Vice President Harris's case, she didn't want to take any risk. She's not coming on Malcolm Nance's podcast. She's not going on Joe Rogan. She's not going on Theo Vaughn's podcast. She's not going to do it. You know, she'll go to controlled environments to say controlled things. Okay, but that's not going to get you elected. You see, you know, and I know, this was once a hiring decision for the American people. It's not that anymore.
Right.
This is a popularity contest. So
Hmm.
we're going to need to find a galvanizing leader
Hmm.
that can talk to, identify with the American people, talk to white working class people, but also black and brown people, Malcolm. Got to be able to
Right.
do both. And you got to be able to, hey, you don't want America to go in this handmaid's tale direction.
Right. And that brings me to my next question, as we're winding down. So I understand that you are working with the new American Party that Elon Musk has proposed. So tell us about that, because to me, I don't look. This could be, I always use this analysis, right? Because people who come back and they'll say, oh, you're a Democrat. Actually, I was Republican most of my life, right? First person I ever voted for was Ronald Reagan. And it was the whole Newt Gingrich, stained dress thing that blew it for me. Because, hey, I was in the Navy, right? So,
Right.
is this stuff illegal now? Uh, all the impeachment of Clinton and everything like that. And I also was from the Colin Powell school of national security, which is national security strong, and conservative and socially liberal, right? Guy grew up in New York. First language like me he ever learned was Yiddish. That's the first language I ever learned. So that being said, we have this two-party system. Elon Musk appears to be on the outs with Donald Trump. He has his own worldview. I know he is a believer in some of the philosophies of Curtis Yarvin, this dark enlightenment theory, which to me, I've said this actually on air. Curtis Yarvin, for those of you who haven't seen or heard of Curtis Yarvin, I recommend you go to the New York Times, watch their 45-minute interview on Curtis Yarvin, a man who is a philosopher. He's a tech bro philosopher from Silicon Valley who does not believe in democracy, believes in a techno monarchy, and pretty much has some crazy things to say. But there are people who are now listening to him. Peter Thiel, David Sachs, Mark Andreessen, the big four South Africans that pretty much run Silicon Valley. But what is it you think Elon Musk can bring to the table? Is he deliberately acting as a spoiler? Has he decided the Republican Party needs to split from MAGA into something else? And hopefully that he'll gain
Well,
popularity with the 80 million people that didn't vote? What is it?
well, in fairness, because it may have been misreported, I'm not yet working with Musk.
Okay.
I am working with Andrew Yang on the Forward
Oh,
Party. I'm a donor
Andrew
of the
Yang.
Forward Party,
Yeah.
and there's a proposal that Andrew has put together to Elon for the American Party. And what I would
Okay.
say to you is, and I think if Elon, because of all those things that you just said, if Elon really wants a centrist party to take hold, you and I both know how hard that would be in the United States because of this very strong duopoly of
Hmm.
these demo publicans that they've put in place. It's going to be very hard to break in. You're going to need tens of billions of dollars to do it. But the
But he
thought would
has tens
have
of billions of dollars.
exactly. So the thought would be put up 10 or 15 billion dollars with you and your friends. I think Larry Ellison would likely be involved. And then here is a decentralized idea to make it stick because I don't think, let's say you and I were worth $100 billion dollars each, and you and I wanted to start the Malcolm and Anthony party, and we're going to put up 10 each, and now it's called the Malcolm and Anthony party. We're not going to get any
Okay.
traction. You need to put up the money. It's almost like Bitcoin, Malcolm. You gotta decentralize it, and
Hmm.
you gotta put up the money and step back from it and allow other people to organize around it under the principles of centrism and under the principles of making the society fair, enough about left or right policy ideas, but more about what's right or wrong for the society. So
Hmm.
if Musk says, "Hey, I'm going full Curtis Yarvin and we're going into dark enlightenment," it's just
Hmm.
not going to stick. It's not going to happen. But if Musk says, "Okay, listen, here are 8 districts that are purplish. I am going to put a purple person in those 8 districts, and I'm going to help them win those 8 districts, which will totally destroy the current nonsense that's going on in Washington, because it would force both sides into a more reminiscent. You mentioned Newt Gingrich, you mentioned Bill Clinton, didn't like each other, but you know what? They were forced to make a lot of compromises for each other, and they got a budget balanced. The last budget that was balanced was a Gingrich Bill Clinton budget. That was the year 2000, $240 billion. So to
But
me,
this isn't
it's
a,
doable,
but it's
but
not
it's
a
not doable
parliamentary.
by just saying I'm going to be Curtis Yarvin.
Sure,
Say
but
again?
you're not this is not we don't have a parliamentary system, right? Those people are going to have to, let's say you win 9 seats, right? And that offsets both parties. Someone is going to those 9 candidates are going to have to caucus with one side or the other in order to elect a speaker, in order to gain committee seats or chairmanships. So one
Okay,
side
so
has,
let
what
but
you
let's
could do is you could be easily setting yourself up to be bought off by money from one or the other side. Well,
it's
one
true.
side. We know Democrats do not have billionaires the way the Republicans do. It's
Well,
just
that's
that
true.
simple.
You could set up a system that could potentially be even more corrupt. But let's just
Mm,
role play for a second. Let's say you and I were the elected leaders,
mhm,
and now these guys are trying to elect a speaker, and you and I say, yeah, okay, we don't like any of those people. Here's the most moderate person in the House, and this is the one that we want. So we're not going to vote. We're not going to allow this to happen until we get there. And
you
and
would
and
have to have 9 people that are so rock solid that none of them would ever stray to one side.
you're right. And I'm saying so this is going to make it very complicated. It's going to make it very
Mm.
hard. But I
Okay.
just think the fact that we're talking about reform, we're talking about the ideas around the current system not working. Malcolm,
Mm,
38% approval rating for the big, beautiful spending bill. They passed it anyway. They know
mhm,
they're going to get reelected. Malcolm,
mhm.
14% approval rating for the Congress, slightly above Kim Il jung, the North Korean dictator, for the Congress. But no problem. 95% of the incumbents get reelected anyway.
Mhm.
So it is no longer public service. It has become public self service.
Mhm.
I'm going. I'm going to rake it over the coals for myself and my family. I'm going to funnel money into my account through insider trading. I'm going to get with the Trumps on their meme coins.
Yeah.
We're gonna have a racket here to fly around the world and meet people. And I'm in the school of public self service, and you can see it in the legislative agenda. The big beautiful spending bill, great for big businesses, great for rich people, really shitty for the working poor, and
Yeah.
really shitty for the working class people. But that's okay. We don't need those people, so we're going to vote this in anyway. So Musk,
Well,
whatever you think of Musk, at least he's calling that out. At least he's
well,
saying, "Hey, this is
he
not
is
working."
calling that out. All right. Well, but again, my analytical take when people say, "Oh, well, you're a liberal, you're this." No, no, no. If this were Burundi, okay, if this were Burkina Faso, which are, by the way, both countries have some real big internal political problems right now.
No question.
One is actually run by a mercenary army. Um, I would give the same analysis that I'm going to give right now. Okay, one of the two sides is going to have a balance of power that is disproportionate to the other. Say what you will about the Democrats. The Democrats are not rich. There are no real rich Democrats. Everyone on the Republican side, which I find ironic because when I was in the military, I was in the Persian Gulf. I got very bored and I read The Fountainhead by Ayn Rand, which is about the size of, Oxford English Dictionary. But it's really the story is about internal nepotism destroying a government where everyone gets the fix, right, by being helped by their bud. And then supposedly the rich, smart people all, fuck off to Colorado or something. Quite couldn't quite figure out that part, the romance. But this system now exists. The Ayn Rand Fountainhead system in ways that it has never existed, or maybe hasn't existed since the 1930s, 20s, now exists to where you must be a grifter to get in there. How many people from Fox News are working in the administration? I think the number's 38 people who are associated, affiliated contributors, from Fox News are in there on the basis of what Donald Trump sees. We have a Secretary of Defense who is a open white supremacists. It purged the Department of Defense of all contributions of women, blacks, minorities, others throughout history, including Medal of Honor winners, and calling it, he actually said DEI is dead in the Department of Defense. We used to call that teamwork, right? Diversity of thought, equality in treatment inside the chain of command in the Uniform Code of Military Justice, and inclusion of all hands into operations. And that we strive for that. But now I've got this government that is run almost strictly nepotistically. They are in it to make money. And I suspect that the pendulum will swing the other way. There will be a president, make crazy President AOC or something like that. Let's hope, she wouldn't be my first choice, who will have the power of a king or queen, whatever it may be. And they could purge the opposite side of everything they've ever done. They could literally drag all of these people into court and have a Justice Department that looks just like Donald Trump's Justice Department and have their own trials. I mean, this thing has not been thought out by the right because it is a oligarch run. We are clearly, I wrote in my book, Plot to Destroy Democracy, which was about how Putin was buying right wing political groups and converting them into these pro Moscow, really oligarch organizations, and that Trump is critical to that. And I said Trump would convert the United States into a constitutional autocracy. And once the Constitution is applied only to those of his followers, and everyone else will be treated as a vassal. So I suspect that we're sort of going there. How, I like the idea of more participation in government. There's 80% of the electorate did not vote, or 80 million people in the electorate did not vote, almost 40 million just didn't vote at all because, their day to day lives are harder. They've got kids to do 5-10 minutes out of their lives. They don't want to think about it. They would rather watch WWE or they'd rather, watch
No
Bugs Bunny or
question.
something like that. How,
No question.
last question, how are you going to mobilize them to support what you do? Because what you described to me is about 95% of Democrats. They're very
Yeah.
purple.
Well,
They want to help people on they tried to recruit me to come in as a candidate. I am huge, I got a huge gun collector, right? Pro Second Amendment. And I was asked back when Basil Smikle was director of the DNC in New York State, he goes, "What would your platform be?" And I go, "I'm from Philadelphia. I'm a strict constitutionalist. I'm a gun owner. But I also understand that for every poor child on the street, that's where your crime comes from. When you can't feed people, you can't give people medical. I have 100% health care to the day I die because I retired from the military. How come the rest of America can't have that? I pretty much come off like Denmark, where I just came from.
hmm
So, you know, I look forward to seeing that. But, if you have any last thoughts on how we can
Well,
achieve that, I'd be
I
welcome to
think
listen.
that you represent something that is needed in our society, and that is the rational middle. And I see the Democrats differently than you. The
Mhm.
Democrats are the last vestige of hope here, but they've got a hard left in their party that wants to cancel people. So, I helped Vice President Harris's team on debate prep. A couple of my punchlines landed in the debate. I then
Mhm.
went to the spin room in Philadelphia with other political leaders to help them in the spin room.
Mhm.
The thought was they wanted me to come on the campaign plane with her. The hard right, the hard left in her party said no. This guy worked for Donald Trump once. He's not
Yeah.
allowed to do that.
And
So
Joe
so
Walsh and,
they
and things like that, you
yeah.
know.
So I'm just saying if you really want to help them, convince them to get people in the tent that they don't like.
Yeah.
Bring, Lyndon Johnson would tell you, Malcolm, let's get everybody in the tent. You know what? You don't like Elon Musk, he's a very powerful guy. Hold your nose. Bring him back into the tent. You don't like Anthony Scaramucci. He once worked for Donald Trump. You didn't like what he said when he was working for him. Okay, no problem. Hold your nose. Bring him back into the tent. Make the
But
party a
Mhm.
pro democracy, pro system, pro American party, and you'll beat the pants off of Trump. But they fight with each other in a way that weakens them.
Look when the whole Israel invasion of Israel by Hamas happened. I was one of the few black pro-Israel candidates, and I spent 40 years working Middle East, Sub-Saharan Africa, Middle East, South Asia intelligence. Palestinian terrorist groups were my first decade, right? I knew all the players. And and I said, "Oh, well, I come at it from a counterterrorism perspective. You can't carry out a mini genocide in southern Israel and not expect to get your ass kicked because this is what Hamas wanted." Um, there is a hard left element in the Democratic Party. I am a candidate for cutting those people away. I mean, cut away. And like you say, a defiant, solid middle, but that middle has shifted. Richard Nixon, Colin Powell, and Ronald Reagan on the XY axis would be lower left corner. And when you get to tell you the truth, I actually wrote a Substack about this where I said Hamas may have destroyed American democracy by allowing Trump to now, advocate genocide. Hamas has definitely killed the Palestinian state. There will never be a Palestinian state. But we have people in this country who I've said straight up, those people are not part of the Democratic Party. We don't want to hear from them, right? And they did a good job, I thought, at the DNC by not allowing them to speak, not allowing Free Palestine to hijack. They were nowhere near the convention in Chicago. They were out in a park 3-4 blocks away, not being represented. You're right. We need to shift hard to the middle. I have some thoughts about who could be a next presidential candidate. That a lot of people just say, "Oh no, we can't have anyone who is military. We've got to do this and that." In the military understand um, of what hardship is, not for ourselves, but people in foreign countries. I've fed a lot of kids with my own rations. I've, given away a lot of things, protected people from terrorist warlords and all these things. And maybe we do need that shift to the hard realism of a
Hmm.
solid center. And I am all for cutting away the crazy left, right? Rashida Tlaib, she wants to represent her constituency without backing the rest of the party. Bye. I've said that on air, right? African Americans who are solidly down the middle, right? A solid 42 million voting block. I'm having a hard time right now convincing them to come out and support anything against Trump because, as a lot of them say, they're exhausted now. They did their job in the last election, and now they're feeling abused. So I wish you luck in in chasing that. I've had it out with Andrew Yang on Twitter a couple of times too, because it's pie in the sky and it's fun to discuss. But I'm a hard grounded realist, right?
I mean,
The
that's why I
sausage
like
must be
talking
made.
to you. I
Yeah.
like talking to you for that reason. Listen, I see the world with its complexity, but I still am trying my hardest. You know what, Malcolm? I'm too short to see the glass as anything other than half full. When I look at the glass, it looks full to me. I gotta try to stay optimistic and lean on some hope that we can fix these ills that we're currently going through.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast.
Oh, look, it's
I
a
would
huge
look
pleasure.
forward to coming on to yours with you and lovely Caddy
Definitely.
K.
I, I, I,
And
I, I, I I would love to talk to you about your books as well on Open Book. So that would be awesome.
Okay, well, eventually here, my memoir has been sitting in the Pentagon for a year getting cleared. It's a top secret, it's got all sorts of crazy
Right.
stuff in there getting cleared. So hopefully my memoir is what we'll be discussing, Thinker,
That'd be
Sailor,
awesome.
Black Man, Spy. And
That'd be awesome. I
and you
love it.
can learn some fun stories about how the rest of the world sees us through an espionage perspective. Right now it
I'm
ain't
in.
pretty, but it was a good learning curve for all of us. So thank you again, and I'll
Thank you,
see you
brother.
out there where you're at.
Yeah,
I'll come
come see
by.
me. You know what? We've had lunch here before. Come see me.
I will do. All right. Take
All
care,
right,
man.
brother. Be well.
That was really a great episode. We have just had some of the best guests on who are bringing into context some of the stressors that are going on within America right now. That will do it for this week's Black Man Spy. But before I go, as you know, I like to quote poems from Rudyard Kipling and other people from the classic period. I'm a member of the Kipling Society, which is in England. I study Rudyard Kipling because as an intelligence officer, foreign linguist specialist, and a writer and author, which is Rudyard Kipling, not just me. I like to take the wisdom that he has for us from the 19th century and transpose it to the 21st century, especially when things are low. But this week, I have a special quote that I'd like to give to you, which comes from another poet, Thomas Babington Macaulay. And this is the story of brave Horatius at the gate. What I will do is I will read the story and then I will give it to you in the backstory in context. So, with that, I'm going to give you a quote of Horatius at the gate. But the consul's brow was sad, and the consul's speech was low, and darkly looked he at the wall, and darkly at the foe. Their van will be upon us before the bridge goes down, and if they once might win the bridge, what hope to save the town? Then outspoke brave Horatius, the captain of the gate, to every man upon this earth death cometh soon or late. And how can man die better than facing fearful odds for the ashes of his fathers and the temples of his gods? And for the tender mother who dandled him to rest, and for the wife who nurses his baby at her breast, and for the holy maidens who feed the eternal flame, to save them from the false sextus that wrought the deed of shame. Hew down the bridge, Sir Consul, with all the speed ye may. I, with two more to help me, will hold the foe in play. In yon straight path 1,000 may well be stopped by 3. Now who will stand on either hand and keep the bridge with me? Then outspoke Spurius Lartius, a Remian proud was he. Lo, I will stand at thy right hand and keep the bridge with thee. And outspoke strong Herminius, of Titian blood was he. I will abide on thy left side and keep the bridge with thee. Horatius, quoth the consul, as thou sayest, so let it be. And straight against that great array forth went the dauntless 3. The story is about the commander of the gates leading into Rome as it was being attacked and invaded by the Etruscans. And Horatius, in this poem, along with just 2 other men, stood by and held the gate of Rome against the Etruscans. And the story, as you can clearly tell, is about standing up against fierce odds, standing against where everyone else is run away and scared and is cowered by the strength of an enemy that comes and faces you. And all he needed was one on his right and his left hand, and he had more than enough bravery to save Rome. Who is our Horatius? Who will stand to your left and to your right? Because you are the captain of the gate in the defense of American democracy. You are the only person who will be able to muster someone to stand on your right and to your left to help save the values that America has had for 250 years, which are now under threat by a wannabe dictator. As General Milley said, we don't take an oath to a king. We don't take an oath to a tyrant. We don't take an oath to a dictator, and we definitely don't take an oath to a wannabe dictator. And like Horatius, what better way to go down than to stand against fearful odds? MAGA does not own America. We are the people. You are the people. We are America. And if we stand fast and stand together, we will all get through this crisis. Well, that's it for this week's Black Man Spy. Thanks for coming. Be sure to tune in and subscribe on Apple, Spotify, YouTube, the Black Man Spy podcast, and Special Intelligence on Substack at malcolmnance.substack.com. You can also find me on Blue Sky at malcolmnance.bsky.social. And if you're still around on Twitter, I'm still there at Malcolm Nance. So thanks again for coming to this episode. I will see you next week on the beach.